Well, we are fortunate today to have Ben Wiles with us. Ben is a chaplain, I have just learned, over several hospitals, and he can tell us about those hospitals and about his journey to becoming a chaplain. I understand he has also served churches, and so he can tell us about that journey. Ben, there are two main things that I like to accomplish with these chapel chats and our guests. One is for them to tell their story as to how they discerned their vocation, their profession, because we've got students that are trying to figure that out for themselves, and I'm inviting persons to share their wisdom. And then after you do that, we'll talk about a little about what you actually do as a chaplain. Okay. Ben, welcome.
Thank you. Well, as Mike said, my name is Ben Wiles. I'm the chaplain for 4 of the 5 St. Thomas Regional Hospitals. I am based out of McMinnville, Tennessee, and I also serve hospitals in Sparta, Smithville, and Woodbury. As far as how I figured out that chaplaincy was where I wanted to end up, I was a preacher in Churches of Christ for about 20 years. I lived all over the place, preaching for primarily smaller churches, country churches, rural churches, struggling churches, and there was a sense of that kind of work that really appealed to me in a certain way. It appealed to my sense of taking on a challenge. It appealed to my sense of going somewhere where I'm needed, where I can be useful and can make a difference in people's lives. But there was also a sense of it where there were certain skill sets that you kind of have to have if you're going to function in that kind of an environment. And I had a sense that no matter how much academic knowledge I had, how many Greek and Hebrew vocabulary words I could pack between my ears, or how many Bible verses I could memorize, or how many different creative ways I could come up with to preach sermons, that there was something that I needed to be doing that I wasn't. And I came to notice that preaching was a lot of hearing my own voice. And I made a discovery about 10 years ago now, that my preaching was starting to stagnate. That in Churches of Christ, we have our Sunday morning service and our Sunday night service, and one of the things I had always made a point of doing was whatever I did on Sunday morning, I wanted to do something different on Sunday night. So there was a Sunday morning when we were working through the New Testament book of 2 Corinthians, and a Sunday night lesson where we were working through the book of Leviticus. And to my surprise and to almost my horror, I discovered that I had effectively preached the exact same sermon both times. And what it ultimately came down to for me was that I was so in my own head. I was so engrossed in trying to crank out sermon after sermon after sermon after sermon that I had spent so much time talking that I had forgotten how to listen. And that I had been so focused on just cranking out the volume of lessons and sermons and Bible studies and all that, that frankly I'd heard enough of me. So I went back to school. I started an MDiv program at Freed-Hardeman out in Henderson, Tennessee, and did it entirely online. So I think I've only been on campus maybe 4 or 5 times in 10 years. But as part of that program, as I neared the end of it, there was an option presented to me for the sort of a culminating project. I could either write a 75-page master's thesis, or I could spend a summer as a hospital chaplain. And since part of the point of all of this was for me not to listen to my own voice if I didn't have to, that seemed to be the one opportunity I had to, I'm just going to spend a summer listening to people, hearing people's stories, actually meeting strangers, not holed up in my office up to my elbows in books and magazines and journal articles and such. So I went to Baptist Hospital in Paducah and enrolled in a program there called Clinical Pastoral Education, and fell in love with it. I was put in situations where, for the first time in 25 years, I had the feeling that I was actually doing ministry. That preaching is fun. I enjoy standing behind pulpits like this, giving talks like this. But chaplaincy, it felt like ministry. It felt like I was actually connecting with people, and I wasn't there putting on a performance. I wasn't there putting on a show. I wasn't there to entertain or to try to make the next 30 minutes bearable so you can get home to your roast turkey or whatever. It really felt like it felt like what I thought ministry was going to be when I became a preacher in the early 90s. And as the last, I guess it'll be 6 years Memorial Day since I started as a chaplain, and in that time I've probably made close to 10,000 hospital visits, and in that time maybe preached a dozen sermons. And having done the preaching thing for as long as I have, I kind of like this now. I am of a belief that one of the ways you can tell what God has made you to do is if you like it too. And so just listening to that process, learning how to listen to my own feelings. That for me has been that's been the war. That's been what I've gone to grad school on being a chaplain, is learning to listen to my own feelings. Katie, my daughter Katie's a student here. She can probably tell you some stories about Dad and oh, I'm happy now. Okay, that must be what this is. But yeah, just discerning what's going on inside of me, learning to speak the language of emotions, and really just following where that is led.
And this is something I try to do with our, we call it Foundations for Scholarship and Learning class, with our first semester students here, is to encourage them to do what you just said you learned to do, and that is to listen to their feelings or their inner voice that I believe God speaks through, because I think when we learn how to do that, we can align what we do with our life up with a higher purpose, and in that we do discover a kind of fulfillment or bliss or whatever you want to call it, that outside of that our life is unsettled, even maybe even tormented, trying to do something other than that, and I think a lot of our students come having been told what they need to do, and they feel like they need to do it, and they try to do it, and it just doesn't work. And sometimes I think maybe age and life experience is what's necessary in order to reach that point where you learn how to do that. I failed to, when I introduced Ben, I failed to acknowledge that he does have a daughter, Catherine, who is a junior student here in our creative writing program. Ben, you've brought back memories that I have of doing a unit of clinical pastoral education at Grady Hospital in Atlanta. I often said that up until that point, like you, I hadn't experienced much of life or much of who I was until I was put in a position of being with people to learn what it's like to be with people and not have an agenda for them, not having a need to fix them or to make things right. In fact, having tried to do that a couple of times, I got called on it by my supervisor.
That's what they're there for.
And pointed out. One of the influences that, in addition to that experience that summer in that hospital setting, was Henry Nouwen's Wounded Healer. That has sort of been determinative for me. It's given me a hermeneutic for being with people and realizing that regardless of where we're coming from, we have a lot of shared humanity. I kind of would like to hear you expand a little bit more on how you have learned to be with people in a healing, comforting, presence of God way.
Okay. The hard answer to that question is trial and error. There's a lot you learn by doing it wrong. Probably the easy answer is tell you a story. I had been a chaplain intern at Baptist Paducah for about 48 hours when this happened. I was showing up. I was supposed to take an on-call shift, and so I walk into the hospital. I get the little pager phone thing, and I'm told that the day shift chaplain needs backup down in the emergency room. I said, okay, here we go, I guess. And so I went down to the emergency room, and the person who was at the desk said the body is in trauma room 1. The chaplain is in there with the immediate family. There's more family in the waiting room. We need you to go be with them. And I have no idea what I'm doing. So I go out into this waiting room and I stand there. I'm clearly there from the hospital. We didn't wear scrubs then. We still look more preacherly. So I went out into this waiting room and I stood there, and I watched for people who looked like they might need something, and I guided people. I showed people where things were when they needed them, and for the most part, I just sort of stayed out of the way, just held a wall up and watched. And they and the time goes on. They start the processing. The coroner comes in, does his thing. The family. This whole thing takes maybe 2.5 to 3 hours, during which I don't remember having much of a conversation with anybody until we got to the end, and the family is being dismissed, and everything that's going to happen at the hospital has. Families going off somewhere else, and the person who was over patient experience came in and is just gushing. Just thank you so much for taking such great care of this family, and we couldn't have done this without you. And I get this look on my face. I think the day shift chaplain recognized, like, what did I do? and so I asked him, I said, what did I do so right? What was it that this person was so excited about happening? And he said, you just learned the most important lesson of chaplaincy. Don't just do something, stand there. And in the 6 or so years since, one of the things I've learned is that my role as the chaplain is to be the one person in the room who knows everything's going to be okay. And it may not be good, but we will get through this. We will get through this moment. I am here to help you. And by virtue of identifying myself as the chaplain, there is an implicit implication, yeah. Katie can fix the vocabulary later. There's an implication that God is there with you too. And as I've gone through my growth process as a chaplain, I have learned more about different kinds of interventions to use at different times and in different circumstances and based on different relationships. I've gotten better at reading rooms, identifying who sort of the family decision maker is, who everybody else is looking to for guidance, and then sort of keying off of them. But really, it was that first ER death. Don't just do something, stand there. And once I got that bit down, the rest of it started to flow more easily.
I relate to that. I remember my own experience as that intern hospital chaplain. This was in Atlanta. Grady's a learning hospital, a lot of residents, and I was with an older African-American couple, and a doctor came in sitting with them, and he very much wanted them to agree to an autopsy so they could decide whether or not the treatment of their loved one had been on target or not. And they kept saying no. I discovered, at least at that time, African American folk did not. They revered the body. The body was sacred, and they didn't want it tampered with, cut on.
Yeah. And they felt an obligation to protect it.
They did, and they were.
Yeah.
And they kept telling this doctor no, until I couldn't take it anymore. And I intervened and said, I really think you need to listen to them. They've tried to tell you their wishes. So would you honor that? Well, he stopped. They went on. And then when they left the room, he let me have it and told me that the hospital was his territory. I didn't belong there, and I surely didn't need to get in the way of what he wanted to do. I went to my supervisor and relayed that to him, and my supervisor said, yeah, you were wrong. I still don't agree with that, but he told me I had no place intervening on their behalf. It wasn't long after that I was with another African-American family. Their daughter, sister, granddaughter, 19 years old, had left that morning to go to Georgia State to school, and then she was working at a daycare center where she had a massive aneurysm and died. They brought her to the hospital. Family gathered in the room, and the nephrologist kept coming in, wanting her kidneys. I understood that. I stayed out of it. He kept coming back. They kept saying no. They were trying to accept that she had died. They weren't at a point of agreeing to let the hospital use her kidneys. And I'm sure they were good kidneys. They were young, and they could have helped two people, I guess. This was about midday, and after all of this had transpired, finally the nephrologist came in one last time, and this young man, I guess he was in his late teens, early 20s, just went off on this doctor. I mean, just went
Yeah.
off on him
Yeah.
and told him, leave us alone. We've told you over and over that we're not interested in agreeing. 3 or 4 more hours passed, and it was getting like 11 o'clock, midnight. And he was the one who said, okay, it's time for us to go home. She's gone. And I think if I had intervened, gotten his way, he would not have been at a point where he could gather that, be the shepherd of that family, gather that family up, and lead them home that day.
Yeah.
So I learned, as you just pointed out, that sometimes the best thing we can do is just be there and let other people do what they need to do and kind of get out of the way. Something that I, as a pastor who, like you, when you were a minister, you probably experienced just how draining funerals can be.
Yes.
Especially when they're for people where the death was unexpected or tragic, and you're with that family. If I did one of those, it really depleted a lot of my Sunday energy.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how you sustain yourself in a hospital setting where you're with people experiencing tragedy. How do you keep going? I remember it was toward the end of my 3 months at Grady. They had given me Ward 6D, and I decided the D stood for death because I finally got a call and had to say to one of my friends they were in my group with me, I said, can you take this call? I just can't do it.
Yeah.
I'm gone. I don't have anything left.
Yeah.
How do you do it? How do you sustain yourself to be with people when being with them, you can't help but your life go to them? So how do you sustain yourself?
Part of the CPE process, and I know you said you did 1 unit of CPE. I needed 6, just because I did. I was a slow learner. But one of the things that you learn in the CPE process is that there are some things we do in life where we are giving away energy, and there are some things we do in life where we are taking energy in. And one of the things I learned about myself is that when I am doing this work, I'm giving energy away. And so part of my job as a chaplain is to walk into a room knowing what my battery level is. And if I'm walking into a room on a 20% charge, I know that my limit is going to be, I know that I'm going to be limited in what I'm going to be able to do. I'm going to have to get in, get out, and then go back and recharge. My way of recharging is with alone time. My way of recharging is to do something that doesn't require any feeling. And Katie will laugh because one of my ways of recharging is recreational arithmetic. I'll look at the numbers on the odometer in the car and then find a number on the side of the road and try to add up the numbers on the car odometer to make the number I just drove past. I don't recommend that to anybody unless it works for you. But one of the real blessings of my job is that my hospitals are 30 minutes apart. And if like today, I started in McMinnville and had a few pretty intense things to do, but then I had a 30-minute drive before I would go meet my folks at Woodbury. So I had that time to recuperate, recharge, turn off the feelings for a while and let that battery regenerate. So that when I got to Woodbury, I had that energy again to start giving it away. So a lot of it really is self-awareness. A lot of it comes down to knowing yourself, knowing how you function best, and just knowing what's going on inside your head, knowing what's going on between your ears, and knowing what's going on in your heart. Learning to speak the language of feelings. That's why it took me 6 units of CPE to get to be a chaplain. By the end of Unit 3, I had made it all the way to babbling toddler in the language of emotions. So a lot of it really is self-awareness, knowing what helps you, and making sure that there is something built into your structure to allow that to happen. The other piece of it for me, it's again one of the tremendous blessings of the particularities of my ministry context, is that it is simultaneously lonely and connecting. It is lonely when I need it to be lonely, and it's connecting when I need it to be connecting. I am the chaplain for 4 hospitals 80 miles from Nashville. So there's a sense in which I'm basically on my own out there. But I am supported by a tremendous department. I'm part of the St. Thomas system, part of the Ascension system, and my support system in Nashville bends over backwards to make sure that I'm getting what I need, because they know he's by himself and there might be something he doesn't think to ask for. So they go out of their way to make sure that I have the support that I need and all that. The other bit of it is because I'm one chaplain for 4 hospitals in 4 different counties. Part of my work is cultivating relationships with ministers in those counties, so that if I'm in Woodbury and something bad happens in Sparta and it's going to be an hour and a half before I can get there, there's somebody in Sparta I can call to say, there's a thing, can you be at the hospital? And in all 4 counties, I have people I can call who can be at a hospital in 10 minutes. And maybe I get there in time, maybe I don't, but building those connections and those friendships with the ministers in McMinnville and in Sparta and in Smithville and in Woodbury, and having those folks that not only I can count on in a crisis, but also when I'm feeling depleted and need to recharge and just need to talk to somebody. A lot of them are themselves experienced ministers. They're not chaplains. They don't have they don't work in the specific context that I do, but they are experienced ministers. And a lot of them are in roles within their denominations where they are support for pastors, and they're accustomed to giving pastoral support. So I'll say I need your professional services for a little bit. Because one of the things about the way I function is I believe that spirituality comes down to connection. What it means to be a spiritual person is to be connected. Internal connection, body, mind, spirit, knowing what's going on in the different parts of you and making sure they're all functioning together. But then also connect as a whole person, connecting myself with my community, connecting myself with the world around me, connecting myself with nature, connecting myself with God, connecting myself with church. And having those connections and cultivating them and intentionally enhancing them in ways that I can. Not only when the loneliness is useful, I take advantage of it. But when the loneliness starts to become a problem, I have those connections that I can fall back on in my department, in my communities, and all that.
As I said earlier, Ben's daughter, Katie, is a student here. One of the things I like to do at these chapel chats is give folks that are present a chance to ask questions. Do you have a question of your dad that you've always wanted to ask, and now you can put him on the spot? Really, from what he said about his work, do you have any question? While you're thinking, our president, Paul Stum, is here. President Stum, do you have a question you'd like to ask Ben? Well, good.
May I ask you from here, or do I need to come up here?
Whatever you'd like to
Whatever
do.
you want to do.
First off, nice to meet you. I'm Paul Stone.
Good to meet you, sir.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you
Certainly.
for entrusting your daughter to us. And
Yes, thank you for starting a creative writing program. It made the college selection process a lot easier.
good.
She wanted to do creative writing, but everybody in their CAT has an English department, but y'all had creative writing. That was exactly
I'm
what she
thrilled that
wanted.
that's what brought you to Cumberland, and I'm glad you're here, Katie. I have a very pragmatic question for you, and you may have said this earlier, and I apologize, I missed the first part. The beauty of this is I get to go back and watch it anytime I want, so, and I will do that. But my question is, as I listen to you talk, it's amazing to me that you are able to accomplish what you do spread out across 4 hospitals in 4 different counties. And I'm just curious, is that was that the plan from the beginning? I mean, are they trying to hire others so that you don't have to be spread out across 4 counties? The Ascension, based in St. Louis, huge system, and they have a lot of, at least from my perspective, they have a lot of financial resources, and I'm sure they don't pay you enough. But nevertheless, take for example St. Thomas West Hospital, which is a huge hospital. Do they have a chaplain there that's shared among other hospitals as well, or do they have 3 chaplains at that hospital?
Well, St. Thomas, or Ascension, is in the process of rethinking how we do chaplaincy specifically and patient care in general. We are in the process of transforming to what they call the caregiver model of the future, where each unit of the hospital is would be about 50 patients, and each of those 50 bed segments would be cared for by an interdisciplinary team,
Including the chaplain?
including a chaplain. Each one would have their own social worker, their own nursing team, their own hospitalist, their own
Seems like a good model.
therapy,
I like that.
therapy, such.
But for 50 beds, that still stretched pretty thin, but you probably have a lot more than 50 beds.
Not usually.
No?
My average daily census, now that COVID is not nearly as insidious as it was 3 months ago,
Yeah.
my average daily census at the 4 hospitals combined has been running 70 to 75.
Really?
So
Of people in beds.
of patients in beds, yes.
Yeah.
So the hospitals out there are small, and that sort of helps make things a bit more manageable.
Okay, that's good. I don't even know, I should know this, but what the site, Vanderbilt Wilson County Hospital is here in Lebanon, and I don't know how many beds they are licensed for. They actually have 2 facilities here. They have the McFarland campus where we have our nursing school, and they have psych and rehab over there, but most of their other medical sort of patients are in the main hospital, and I'm going to say they have 200. Mike, you might know that.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, about 200.
I don't know how many beds are full at any one time. I think that.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that was my very. I just thank you.
Certainly. But one of the other elements of the pragmatics of it is that one of the needs that St. Thomas recognized when they started moving out into that rural area was the need for psychiatric care. Our Stones River Hospital in Woodbury is almost all inpatient psychiatric now. We have senior care units at Sparta and at McMinnville. And it is not terribly uncommon for us to have 2 or 3 patients in an ER awaiting placement at
One of the psych.
at Moccasin Bend or one of the other inpatient psychiatric hospitals.
And do you find that's been exacerbated by the COVID?
I think where we are now, we've been headed to for a long time.
Maybe COVID was just a catalyst for that.
I think COVID has made hard things harder, but I also think that there were a lot of folks who didn't have a lot of margin for error to start with, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
And
maybe COVID pushed them over the edge.
they were going to be struggling anyway.
Yeah.
And if it weren't for COVID, we might have, the number might have been like 2/3 to 3/4 of what it is now. But I think,
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
yeah, I
And
think,
is that handled by a lot of psychiatric nurse practitioners or psychiatrists?
we have, I think 2, maybe 3 psychiatrists, and then 2 or 3 psychiatric nurse practitioners. We also have some of our RNs who are in training to become psychiatric nurse practitioners.
Sure.
I know of at least 3 in our system, just at the regionals, where that's what they're studying to do. So,
Very good.
so that's one of the big needs in the regionals. It's one of the big needs in rural areas, and it's frankly one of the big needs in chaplaincy.
I think it's one of the big needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, everywhere. It's a
Yeah.
ubiquitous.
Yeah, yeah. And part of why I'm here today is on the off chance that there might be somebody watching this who might be interested in psychiatric chaplaincy. Because that's a direction that the St. Thomas piece of Ascension is looking to move in, to expand that presence and to have,
You got to have some special talents and the right heart to do that, don't you?
yeah, it is very much its own animal.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for ably answering my question. And
Certainly.
thank you for being
Certainly.
here. I appreciate it very
Thank
much.
you.
Katie, have you thought of a question you want to put your dad on the spot with? If not, that's okay. You can be nice to him. And I've got a daughter, and I like it when she's nice to me. And President Stum does too. What I've asked of all of our guests is to put themselves, and you won't have any trouble because you've got a daughter that's college age. What would you say, knowing what college students are going through today? I'm glad I'm not one today. I don't think I could make it through. What would you, what wisdom, what good word, what would you say to them?
Okay. One thing I would say is, and this is a scholarship passion of mine as much as it is a chaplaincy, and that's going to tell you something, is I recognize that the world in which today's college students have grown up has been a much harder world to grow up in than what I saw in the 70s and 80s. And I mentioned my scholarly interest. Part of my psychiatric chaplaincy work revolves around what they call adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. Things like divorce, things like parents being incarcerated, things like physical, mental, emotional, sexual abuse. And what I see a lot in my psychiatric chaplaincy work is a lot of the after effects of that. People who were sexually abused at 16 who come to my psychiatric hospital at 70 and don't know why they having such issues, and we plumb those depths. But one of the things I recognize is that Katie's generation has experienced a lot more of those than mine has. And my generation experienced a lot more of those than my parents' generation did. That sort of emotional baggage that you carry with you. A lot of what this generation of college students is carrying is frankly a lot heavier than what I had to deal with, what my friends dealt with, and even what some of my chaplaincy peers my age bring into all this. So as words of wisdom go, I guess what I would want them to, I guess what I would want a college age audience to take away would be that you don't have to carry all of that yourself. Spirituality is connection. And there is a temptation when you are carrying these kinds of burdens to try to take them on yourself. There's a temptation, there's that wounded animal temptation to try to crawl in a hole and hide and so that nothing else gets you until this problem goes away. If you're carrying something like that, and you're carrying a lot of somethings like that, there's a decent chance that there are other people around you who are carrying similar things. And similarity can facilitate connection even when it's similarity of pain. That's why support groups are support groups. That's why mothers of twins meet with other mothers of twins to talk about similar experiences and the things that are unique to being a mother of twins.
That's one of the reasons why we do these chaplains.
Yeah. So I guess word of wisdom number one is that you're not alone in this. And when your pain does start to isolate you and starts to make you feel isolated, the more aware of that you can be, the more you can seek the kinds of remedies and coping mechanisms and things that connect you to other people, connect you to the world, connect you to God. That it seems like connection would be helpful there. That rather than letting it isolate you, let it draw you into community rather than take you away from it.
I teach a Bible as literature course, and we look at lament psalms, and I have them write a lament. And I am just overwhelmed by the pain and the trauma that our students are carrying around that gets in the way of college for them. You know, I am amazed that they're surviving. That they're standing up on 2 feet, much less trying to do college on top of everything. I'll always recall a student. We also look at callings in the Bible. And I had them write an essay on what they perceive their calling to be. And this one young man said, I want to be a chiropractor. And I said, why do you want to be a chiropractor? And he said, to help people deal with their physical pain without opioids. Both of my parents are addicted. We've lost our house. We've lost everything. Wow. And well, sometimes I think we need a MASH unit here, and then we can do education after we tend to the kind of experiences that you're talking about. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Ben, for coming this way, and I understand that you and your daughter are going to get to spend some time together as you head back to McMinnville today.
We've got a nice drive ahead of us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Paul, thank you for coming.
I'm sorry I was late, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it.